The great city of Lumira stretched across the silver plains like a dream in crystal and light. Towering spires rose toward the sky, catching the pale glow of the twin suns and reflecting it in gentle patterns over the streets below. It was a city built for those who could see, a place where light was worshipped, and visions mattered more than words. Yet in the heart of this magnificent empire, Empress Cerelia moved with a grace and purpose that few could imagine. She was blind. From birth, she had never seen the colors of Lumira, nor the splendor that others took for granted. Still, she ruled with a mind sharper than any blade and a heart wiser than the oldest council in the empire. Her chambers were quiet, except for the soft rustle of her attendants. Cerelia's fingers traced the delicate carvings of her council table, feeling every groove and indentation as she considered the reports before her. Each line of text was read aloud by her aides, and every nuance of tone, every hesitation or emphasis was captured by her keen sense of hearing. Where others saw with eyes, she perceived with mind and spirit. Today, the city was unusually alive with a sense of anticipation. Word had come that representatives from the distant star systems had arrived for the annual Interstellar Summit. Among them, the human ambassador, Captain Jaron Hale, had been noted for his reputation of intelligence and charm. Humans were rarely invited to such summits. Their technology was primitive by Elithrian standards, and their society often misunderstood. Yet, the human's approach to negotiation and his history of clever solutions had earned him a place here. Cerelia listened as her advisors spoke of the ambassador, some skeptical, others curious. "Empress," said Minister Vale, the elder of the council, "this human, he is clever, yes. But remember, he comes from a species that is weak compared to ours. Do not be distracted. Sometimes wisdom comes in forms we do not expect." When the ambassador arrived, he was as human as any other, standing slightly taller than average, with a confident posture and eyes that seemed to study everything around him. He moved carefully, aware of the grandeur that surrounded him, yet he carried himself with a natural ease that suggested he belonged in no matter what world he stood. Cerelia was brought into the grand hall, a vast room filled with the light of crystal chandeliers and the hum of advanced technology. Despite her blindness, she sensed the presence of every being in the room. She felt their movements, their subtle shifts in balance, their breathing and heartbeats. She did not need sight to know the weight of their attention. Captain Jaron Hale approached, bowing slightly. "Empress Cerelia," he said, his voice steady but respectful. "It is an honor to meet you. I have heard much of your wisdom and leadership. I hope to contribute in any way I can." "Captain Hale, wisdom is a gift of experience and reflection. Let us learn from one another. Tell me, what brings humanity to these summits, aside from the obvious political reasons? We do not always have the greatest strength, but we have ingenuity and understanding. That is why I am here, to learn and to show that humans can contribute ideas that matter. Yet understanding requires more than sight. It requires listening, thinking, and feeling. Perhaps, Captain, you may teach us as much as we teach you." She asked questions that seemed simple but were layered with complexity, prompting Jaron to think differently, to see connections he had not considered. As the day went on, the summit began. Elithrian representatives debated trade routes, defense strategies, and cultural exchanges. Yet Cerelia, seated in her place of command, listened carefully to every argument. Her mind mapped the discussions like a three-dimensional puzzle, noting weaknesses and opportunities alike. Jaron, too, noticed that her insight was exceptional. Many Elithrians relied on data projected on crystal displays, yet Cerelia understood the subtleties without seeing the charts. She relied on patterns of speech, the rhythm of voices, and the choices made by others. It was not just intelligence, it was perception, intuition, and empathy combined. During one heated debate, Minister Vale argued for a more aggressive expansion into neighboring star systems, citing potential resources and strategic advantages. "Empress, we must act swiftly," he insisted. "Delays may give our rivals an edge." "Minister, your plan values speed and control, but it ignores the perspectives of those we would encounter. Expansion without understanding breeds resistance and rebellion. True leadership seeks not only advantage but harmony. We must proceed with caution, diplomacy, and foresight." Her words had a precision that cut through assumptions, and her intuition was rarely flawed. Captain Hale, observing quietly, recognized the subtle brilliance of her approach. Humans often acted with innovation, seeing problems from new angles. Elythrians, for all their technological prowess, sometimes overlooked the value of moral reasoning and adaptability. Here was a ruler who combined intellect with empathy, and even without sight, she commanded insight that rivaled any vision-based strategy. By the afternoon, the summit had reached a turning point. A proposal by a rival species to claim a disputed system was met with careful scrutiny. Ceralia's questions exposed flaws in their logic, while Captain Hale suggested alternatives that minimized conflict while maximizing mutual benefit. Together, their ideas formed a plan that left both Elythrians and visiting delegates impressed. As the summit drew to a close, Ceralia invited Jaren to walk with her through the gardens of the palace. The gardens were vast, filled with plants whose colors she could not see but whose scents and textures spoke volumes. She moved carefully, guided by the soft hum of the artificial breeze and the gentle sound of flowing water. "You have changed my perspective, Captain," she said, pausing to touch the rough bark of a tree. "Humanity often seems fragile to the galaxy, but your species has a resilience and creativity that I admire. Perhaps this meeting is only the beginning of what we can achieve together. And I see now that Elythrians are not only powerful, but capable of wisdom beyond their technology." She realized that alliances were more than treaties. They were about understanding, trust, and shared vision. For the first time in centuries, the Elythrian Empire seemed poised for something new, not just growth or conquest, but true progress, guided by insight, courage, and collaboration. And at the center of it all, the blind Empress, Ceralia, understood that the most important vision was the one that came from the mind and the heart, not the eyes. Captain Hale walked beside her, a human among Elythrians, yet no longer a stranger. Together, they represented a meeting of worlds, a union of perspectives, and a spark that could change the galaxy. In the quiet of the garden, they spoke not only of politics but of possibilities, of challenges yet to come, and of the strength found in unexpected places. As night fell, Ceralia returned to her chambers, her thoughts alive with strategy, insight, and anticipation. She had met a human, and in that encounter she had glimpsed the power of partnership, the potential of ingenuity, and the promise of a future shaped not by strength alone, but by intelligence, empathy, and courage. The stars outside Lumira twinkled endlessly, and in their light, Ceralia felt a new kind of vision forming, a vision of unity, of understanding, and of the remarkable things that could happen when worlds and minds met. The days after the summit were filled with quiet tension. Empress Ceralia could feel it in the air, even without seeing. The Elythrian Council moved with cautious deliberation, whispers spreading like soft winds through the halls. Some were uneasy about her interaction with Captain Jaren Hale. To them, a human, fragile, untested, and unknown, was not a suitable companion for their Empress. Yet Ceralia paid little heed to gossip. Her focus was on understanding, learning, and seeing beyond fear. Jaren, for his part, adapted quickly to the rhythms of the Elythrian court. He was patient, careful, and observant, but he also carried the confidence of someone who had faced countless challenges on Earth. While humans were often underestimated, Jaren had learned that adaptability and thinking outside rigid rules were the greatest strengths his species possessed. With Ceralia, he found a kindred spirit, one who valued intelligence, reasoning, and creativity over mere appearances. It was a quiet evening when the Empress summoned him to her private study. The room was serene, filled with soft vibrations from the crystal floors and the faint scent of flowering plants that grew indoors for those with delicate senses. Ceralia sat at her desk, her hands resting lightly on the carved surface. "Captain," she began, her voice calm and deliberate, "I find your perspective refreshing. Elythrians are skilled, yes, but they sometimes forget the value of imagination, flexibility, and empathy. You remind me that even small minds, or those considered weak, can change outcomes. Then perhaps it is time for Elythrians to consider paths they have ignored for centuries. And perhaps it is time I learned to trust the wisdom of those I would never have expected." Jaren offered insights into conflict resolution that drew on human history, negotiation, and creativity, while Ceralia explained Elythrian principles, ethics, and strategy. Together, they formed a rhythm, a partnership that bridged species and experiences. But not everyone was pleased. Minister Vale, who had always been cautious of humans, voiced his concerns quietly to other council members. "The Empress is blinded not just by her condition, but by admiration for a species that lacks the depth and discipline we rely upon. We must not allow a human to influence decisions that shape the future of our empire. She understood that leadership was not simply about following tradition. It was about courage, trust, and foresight. In the following weeks, political tensions began to mount. Neighboring star systems, long observing the Elythrians' calculated perfection, saw an opening in the subtle unease. Rumors of the Empress's growing friendship with Jaren reached them, and some began to question whether the Empire was as united as it appeared. In the quiet of her chambers, Cerelia considered the implications. To her, the answer was clear. Strength was not only in power or sight, but in intelligence, courage, and unity. One evening, she called Jaren to a secluded terrace overlooking the city. Though she could not see the lights that shimmered below, she felt the pulse of the city alive and vibrant. "I have been thinking," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of resolve and warmth. "Humans are underestimated, but I see their value. I also see that our partnership could inspire more than just ideas. It could reshape how Elythrians think about strength and leadership. If we can show that humans and Elythrians can work together, perhaps others will see that collaboration and wisdom are stronger than pride alone." Yet she felt a certainty deep within, a conviction that human perspective combined with Elythrian guidance could bring new possibilities to the galaxy. Days passed, and the council noticed a change in the Empress. She walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and even as her blindness remained, she seemed more aware than ever before. Jaren's presence was subtle yet powerful. He never interfered with decisions, but his insights and observations gave Cerelia new clarity. Together, they began to propose initiatives that focused on cooperation, innovation, and mutual understanding, rather than conquest or tradition. Still, whispers of disapproval grew louder. Minister Vale and his allies began planning subtle resistance, suggesting to the Empress that human influence could compromise their long-term security. "Your Majesty," Vale said during a council session, "humans are clever, but they lack our experience. Your reliance on them, even for advice, risks the stability of Lumira. We must consider whether such influence is appropriate. I trust wisdom where I find it, regardless of its source." They met in the palace gardens, under the quiet hum of flowering trees that thrived despite the artificial environment. Cerelia reached out to touch the petals of a bloom, feeling their texture and subtle vibrations. "Captain," she said softly, "I have come to trust you not just for your intelligence, but for your character. Humans are unusual, yet I find strength in your clarity, your courage, and your vision. You see possibilities that others overlook. Perhaps there is more we can share than counsel advice alone." "Empress," he said carefully, "I feel the same. I came here hoping to make a difference, but I did not expect to find someone who understands the value of perspective as deeply as you do. If there is a path forward together, I would take it." Cerelia smiled, though Jaren could not see it, and extended her hand. He took it, feeling the warmth of her resolve and the steady pulse of her confidence. Meanwhile, Elythrian society outside the palace began to notice subtle changes. Advisors, diplomats, and citizens observed that the Empress's decisions were sharper, more balanced, and unusually considerate of perspectives beyond their own. Even skeptics began to see the value in collaboration with humans, though many would not admit it openly. Yet challenges were never far away. A neighboring system, the Dravani Collective, watched the subtle shifts in Lumira with growing interest. They perceived uncertainty and began to test boundaries, probing for weaknesses in trade agreements and security protocols. It became clear to Cerelia that the galaxy was changing, not just because of external threats, but because ideas, partnerships, and innovation could alter the balance of power. During a council meeting, Cerelia proposed a new initiative, one that combined human creativity with Elythrian technology. "We must think beyond tradition," she said. "Our strength lies not only in our technology or strategy, but in our ability to adapt, to learn, and to understand perspectives beyond our own. Captain Hale has shown us that collaboration can achieve results that rigid thinking cannot. Let us embrace this fully." Then slowly, nods began to appear. A new understanding was forming, that intelligence, empathy, and adaptability were as powerful as the finest weapons or the largest fleets. Later, in the privacy of her chambers, Cerelia spoke with Jaren about the implications. "The galaxy judges us, Captain, not only by what we show, but by how we inspire others to see differently. Humans are underestimated, yet their ideas can illuminate paths that others cannot. Together, we may guide Lumira toward a new era, one where insight and courage shape the future more than pride or tradition. But with trust, understanding, and courage, anything seems possible. The Empress, though blind, saw more clearly than anyone in the council that wisdom, collaboration, and courage could reshape the galaxy, and that humans, despite their smallness, could be powerful allies in ways few anticipated. In the quiet of the palace gardens, Cerelia felt a sense of certainty. She did not need sight to know the truth of what was possible. A human stood beside her, not as a servant or subject, but as a partner. Together, they could build bridges between species, inspire loyalty, and show that intelligence, empathy, and courage were not bound by biology or tradition. And so the Empress and the human ambassador began their journey, not just as allies of convenience, but as partners who could change the course of Lumira and perhaps the galaxy itself. In the coming days, the whispers of skepticism would grow louder, challenges would present themselves, and alliances would be tested. Yet Cerelia and Jaren understood something profound. The future would not be won by power alone, but by wisdom, creativity, and the courage to see potential where others saw none. The days following the summit and the quiet strengthening of Cerelia and Jaren's partnership brought new challenges. Though Lumira appeared calm from the outside, subtle shifts in political energy hinted at tensions beneath the surface. The Elithrian Council, divided in its opinion of the human ambassador, had begun plotting in hushed tones. Some feared that Cerelia's trust in Jaren would undermine centuries of tradition. Others quietly admired her vision, seeing wisdom in her openness to ideas from beyond their species. Empress Cerelia, however, remained undeterred. She understood that leadership was not about appeasing all voices, but about guiding her empire with intelligence, insight, and courage. She met with Jaren daily, consulting on proposals that blended human creativity with Elithrian technology and strategic thinking. Their discussions spanned the practical and the philosophical, considering not only immediate governance, but the long-term implications of innovation and collaboration. One morning, the Empress felt a subtle tension as she moved through the corridors of her palace. Her attendants noticed her slight pause and quickened steps, but she dismissed it as intuition. In her mind, she was already mapping possibilities and anticipating challenges. The summit had strengthened alliances, but it had also drawn attention from neighboring systems, particularly the Dravani Collective, a distant alliance of star systems that had long regarded Lumira's influence with cautious envy. The Dravani were not known for open hostility. They relied on observation, subtle pressure, and opportunism to extend their influence. Yet rumors had begun circulating. The humans in Lumira and the Empress's openness to their ideas were unusual and potentially destabilizing. To the Dravani, any change in tradition was a crack that could be exploited. Cerelia and Jaren were discussing an initiative to improve resource sharing between star systems when the Empress paused, sensing the undercurrent of concern. "Jaren," she said softly, "something is stirring in the neighboring alliances. They are observing us closely, perhaps anticipating hesitation or error. We must consider how our actions appear to them and how our partnerships might be misunderstood. Other civilizations judge us by appearances, by assumptions about weakness or simplicity. But what they cannot see is our ingenuity, our willingness to adapt. Perhaps we can use that same approach here, to demonstrate strength through intelligence and creativity, not just force. We must show that cooperation, foresight, and moral courage are as powerful as any weapon, and perhaps more enduring. We must be prepared to guide her back to caution." She called a private meeting with Jaren in the central chamber of the palace, a vast room with soft acoustic waves that carried every sound clearly. They sat at a round table, allowing ideas to flow freely in all directions. "Jaren," she began, "we cannot ignore the whispers, nor the potential observations from beyond our borders, yet we also cannot be guided solely by fear or tradition. The path forward must be grounded in wisdom and collaboration. The key is to anticipate, adapt, and remain consistent in our values. And we will demonstrate that humans and Elithrians working together can achieve results that others cannot." Another focused on environmental management, combining human ingenuity with Elithrian knowledge to create sustainable cities across Lumira's colonies. As these initiatives developed, Cerelia observed reactions throughout the council. Some members resisted openly, worried about appearing to favor a human. Others began to see the value in the ideas, impressed by the practicality and foresight embedded in them. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but Cerelia recognized the importance of these small victories in shaping the future. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens, she reflected on the nature of influence. The gardens were a sanctuary with plants that thrived despite her inability to see them. She ran her hands along the stems and petals, feeling textures, vibrations, and the gentle warmth of growth. "Captain," she said quietly, "the world judges what it can see, yet most of the universe cannot perceive the subtle currents that shape outcomes. Leadership is not about being seen. It is about guiding, understanding, and inspiring. And I believe you understand this as well as any Elithrian. That is what drew me to your leadership. You see more than most because you do not rely solely on sight. You rely on understanding." It was not a threat of open conflict, but a test, an observation of how the Elithrians and their human ally would respond. Cerelia convened the council to discuss strategy, carefully balancing her words. "We have noticed unusual attention from our neighbors. They are observing, testing our unity and our decision-making. We will respond not with aggression, but with intelligence, foresight, and collaboration. We will show that Lumira is guided by wisdom and capable minds, regardless of who advises us." But Cerelia's tone left no room for doubt. She had considered every angle, anticipated objections, and already envisioned the outcomes. Jaren contributed practical suggestions, emphasizing adaptability. "Empress, we can demonstrate strength by highlighting competence, communication, and problem-solving. Let them see that we respond with clarity, not reaction. That will discourage any assumptions of weakness." Her efforts to improve communication, trade, and city planning were noted as forward-thinking and wise. Even the ordinary citizens began to feel the influence of ideas from beyond their species. Humans, once seen as insignificant, were now recognized as contributors to progress and understanding. One afternoon, Jaren and Cerelia met in the observation chamber of the palace, a room filled with gentle vibrations and sounds that allowed the Empress to perceive the galaxy beyond the walls. She rested her hands on the railing, sensing the movement of ships and trade networks. "Captain," she said, "I realize that leadership is not about domination, nor is it about appearances. It is about insight, preparation, and trust. Together, we have shown that even a species considered weak can contribute meaningfully to an empire. Together, we can continue to guide Lumira and perhaps influence others to reconsider what strength truly means." She recognized the potential for collaboration rather than confrontation. "This," she said, "is an opportunity. We will respond thoughtfully, demonstrating our capabilities and showing that Lumira's leadership is guided by wisdom and cooperation. The galaxy will understand that our strength lies not in appearances, but in insight." Together, they drafted a response that highlighted Lumira's principles, technological advancements, and commitment to collaboration. It was precise, respectful, and clever, an approach designed to earn trust rather than intimidate. The weeks that followed saw subtle changes across Lumira. The council gradually accepted the human perspective as a complement to their own. Citizens began to notice improvements in infrastructure, communication, and environmental management. And the neighboring systems, observing these developments, began to recognize that Lumira's strength was rooted not just in technology or power, but in leadership that valued insight, creativity, and moral courage. Cerelia reflected often on these days, recognizing that the most powerful change was not in the systems or the alliances, but in perception. Humans were no longer a curiosity or a novelty. They were valued contributors to the future of Lumira. And through their partnership, she had shown her empire that wisdom, courage, and collaboration could redefine what was possible. Even as distant eyes watched, testing, observing, and waiting, the Empress felt confident. She did not need sight to perceive the strength of her empire, the potential of its people, or the power of partnership. And with Jaren at her side, she knew that they could navigate the subtle challenges of the galaxy, not with fear, but with intelligence, creativity, and unwavering courage. The stars outside Lumira continued to shine, a vast and unending horizon of possibility. And within the palace, the blind Empress and the human ambassador prepared for the days ahead, united in vision, purpose, and the quiet determination to show that intelligence, empathy, and courage were the true measures of strength. The weeks after the summit were filled with both promise and tension. Lumira had begun to change in subtle ways. Citizens noticed new systems for trade, communication, and learning that allowed ideas to flow more freely than ever before. Yet, within the higher circles of the empire, not all welcomed this transformation. Some council members still viewed the human ambassador, Captain Jaren Hale, as an outsider whose influence was dangerous. Empress Cerelia, despite her blindness, moved through the palace with quiet confidence. She sensed every shift in the atmosphere, every hesitation in the voices of her advisors, and every unspoken concern in the corridors. Her ability to perceive beyond the obvious made her stronger than any ruler who relied solely on sight. The trust she shared with Jaren had deepened, becoming both personal and professional. Together, they were a team blending Elithrian experience with human ingenuity. One morning, the Empress summoned Jaren to her private study. The room was filled with the gentle hum of crystal technology, a sound that resonated beneath her fingertips as she moved toward the desk. "Captain," she said, "I have received reports of increased attention from the neighboring systems. They are curious about our initiatives, and some are testing our resolve. We must show them that Lumira is guided by insight, cooperation, and courage, not by fear or uncertainty. When we are underestimated, we rely on creativity, adaptability, and collaboration to show our value. Perhaps we can apply the same approach here. Anticipate challenges, work together, and demonstrate our strength through intelligence and understanding." Leadership is not just about responding to threats, but about shaping perception. If we demonstrate the strength of wisdom and partnership, others will follow our example, not because they are forced, but because they recognize its value. They focused on communication networks, environmental management, and educational initiatives that allowed citizens to participate in shaping the empire's future. The goal was clear: to strengthen Lumira not only through power but through innovation, collaboration, and intelligence. Meanwhile, whispers within the council continued. Minister Vale and his allies remained skeptical, quietly attempting to steer the Empress away from relying on human perspectives. Yet Cerelia's unwavering confidence and precise reasoning left them with little room to challenge her openly. She anticipated their concerns, addressing them with calm authority and evidence-based arguments. Over time, even the skeptics began to acknowledge the value of her approach, though they still clung to tradition in private. The growing tension came to a head during a council meeting when a representative from a distant system, the Sorithians, raised questions about Lumira's recent initiatives. "Your Majesty," the representative said, "we have observed unusual changes in your governance. We are concerned about stability and the influence of non-Elithrians on your decisions. How can we be certain that these initiatives will benefit all systems and not favor outsiders?" Turning to Jaren, she asked, "What would you suggest, Captain?" "Show that humans and Elithrians together can create solutions that serve everyone fairly and effectively. Let wisdom, not assumptions, shape their understanding." Jaren added examples of practical implementation, drawing from human experience to illustrate problem-solving and adaptability. The combination was powerful. The representatives were impressed, and even the most cautious members of the council began to see the potential for a new era of cooperation. In the days that followed, Lumira's influence grew, not through force but through vision. Citizens embraced the changes, contributing ideas and solutions. Communication between planets improved, trade became more efficient, and educational programs allowed younger generations to develop both practical skills and creative thinking. The empire was evolving, guided by wisdom, insight, and the partnership between a blind empress and a human ambassador. Yet challenges were never far away. Rumors reached Cerelia that some neighboring systems, while outwardly respectful, were observing Lumira closely, seeking opportunities to test her leadership. The Dravani Collective, in particular, appeared curious about the human's role and the influence of Elithrian tradition. One afternoon, as Cerelia and Jaren walked through the palace gardens, she spoke softly, her fingers brushing the petals of flowering plants. "Captain, the galaxy watches us carefully. They seek weakness or hesitation. We must continue to demonstrate that strength lies not in appearances or tradition alone, but in intelligence, creativity, and collaboration. Together, we can show the galaxy the power of insight and cooperation." It was a chance to demonstrate leadership through wisdom rather than dominance. "This is our moment," she said. "We will respond with clarity and precision, showing that Lumira's governance is guided by understanding, foresight, and the willingness to learn from all perspectives. Let us show them that collaboration and intelligence are true strengths. Together, they crafted a response that emphasized transparency, inclusivity, and the benefits of innovation. It highlighted the partnership between humans and Elythrians, framing it as a model for intelligent cooperation rather than dependence. The response was elegant, thoughtful, and persuasive, leaving the observers with a sense of respect rather than suspicion. In the following weeks, the influence of Lumira continued to expand quietly. Other systems began to adopt elements of the Empress's initiatives, recognizing that the combination of insight, collaboration, and adaptability created tangible benefits. Even skeptics within the council acknowledged the effectiveness of the approach, seeing that leadership founded on wisdom and empathy could achieve remarkable results. During this period, the bond between Cerelia and Jaren grew stronger. Their partnership was no longer solely professional. It had become a shared vision for the future of the Empire. They spent hours discussing not only governance but the principles that underpinned effective leadership: trust, understanding, and the courage to challenge assumptions. One evening, Cerelia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Despite her blindness, she had perceived the potential in a human ambassador and recognized the value of ideas from beyond her species. Together, they had demonstrated that innovation, insight, and moral courage could shape the future of an entire empire. "Captain," she said softly, "the galaxy will always test us. But I have learned that true strength lies not in appearances, nor in power alone. It lies in the ability to think, to understand, and to inspire. And you have shown me that humans, underestimated though they may be, possess remarkable strength in these ways." Lumira is becoming a model for what can be accomplished when insight guides action. Yet she felt confident that with Jaren by her side, the Empire could navigate any difficulty, not through fear or force, but through wisdom, collaboration, and courage. As night fell over Lumira, the twin moons casting their soft glow across the silver plains, the Empress stood in the gardens, feeling the vibrations of the city, the pulse of trade, and the subtle rhythm of life across her empire. She sensed not only the challenges that lay ahead, but the incredible potential. A human stood beside her, a partner in thought and vision, and together they had begun to shape a future defined by intelligence, empathy, and collaboration. The stars above Lumira twinkled endlessly, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the limitless possibilities before them. Within the palace, the blind Empress and the human ambassador continued their work, united in vision, purpose, and the determination to prove that insight, courage, and collaboration were the true measures of strength. In these quiet but decisive days, the foundations of a new era were laid. Lumira was no longer guided solely by tradition and hierarchy, but by the power of understanding, the courage to innovate, and the recognition that even the most unexpected alliances could shape the destiny of a galaxy. Cerelia closed her hands over the railing of the garden terrace, feeling the steady pulse of the city below. "Captain," she said, "we are ready. The future is not determined by fear, but by those who are willing to see, understand, and act with wisdom and courage." Together, they looked forward not to conflict, but to the opportunities ahead. Opportunities to inspire, to innovate, and to demonstrate that even a species considered small or fragile could, through intelligence, empathy, and partnership, shape the destiny of an entire empire. The quiet night of Lumira held a sense of anticipation. It was a calm before the challenges that would inevitably arrive, yet also a moment of affirmation. The partnership between a blind Empress and a human ambassador was proving that leadership founded on insight, collaboration, and courage could achieve results beyond imagination. And so, the Empress and her human ally continued their work, guided not by fear, but by wisdom, vision, and the unwavering belief that intelligence, empathy, and courage were the greatest strengths any species could possess. The days turned into weeks, and the partnership between Empress Cerelia and Captain Jaren Hale had begun to ripple across the galaxy. Lumira was no longer just an empire admired for its technology and traditions. It had become a symbol of wisdom, adaptability, and collaboration. The citizens noticed the changes, the council slowly adjusted, and even the neighboring systems could not ignore the influence of the human ambassador who had won the trust of their blind Empress. Cerelia moved through the halls of the palace with her usual calm grace. Though she had never seen the intricate designs of her surroundings, she knew them as well as any sighted ruler could. Every sound, every vibration, every whisper of air told her more than appearances ever could. She sensed the excitement and anticipation in the city, felt the pulse of trade and communication, and understood that her leadership, guided by insight and collaboration, was changing the future. Jaren accompanied her, quietly observing, learning, and offering guidance when asked. He had become a trusted partner, respected not only for his intelligence, but for his unwavering moral compass. Together, they had demonstrated that leadership was not bound by species, appearance, or tradition, but by insight, courage, and empathy. One morning, Saralia called a meeting with the council and representatives from several neighboring systems. The chamber was filled with individuals who had once doubted her judgment and questioned the influence of humans in Elithrian governance. Now they listened intently, aware that Lumira's recent initiatives had already transformed lives across the galaxy. "Representatives," Saralia began, her voice steady and commanding, "we have faced scrutiny, observation, and questions about our approach. Some have wondered whether collaboration with humans was wise. Today, I present the results of our efforts, not as proof of human ability alone, but as evidence that leadership founded on intelligence, empathy, and cooperation can shape a prosperous future." He spoke of resource-sharing initiatives, improved communication networks, and the successful programs that allowed younger generations to participate in governance and innovation. He highlighted the ways human creativity and flexibility had complemented Elithrian experience, creating solutions that neither could have achieved alone. The representatives listened carefully, impressed by the clarity and effectiveness of the approach. Even those who had previously harbored doubts began to nod in recognition. The combination of insight, strategy, and collaboration had produced results that were undeniable. Lumira was thriving, not through dominance or fear, but through wisdom and partnership. After the presentation, Saralia and Jaren walked together through the palace gardens. The twin moons had risen, casting a gentle glow across the silver plains. Though Saralia could not see the light, she felt it in the warmth and rhythm of the world around her. "Captain," she said softly, "we have faced doubt, scrutiny, and skepticism. Yet we have shown that courage, intelligence, and empathy can overcome assumptions and prejudice. Humanity, underestimated though it often is, has demonstrated remarkable strength in thought, creativity, and moral clarity. Together, we have transformed Lumira and inspired others to see beyond appearances. We adapt, we collaborate, and we persevere. But the real success comes from partnership. Your insight, wisdom, and courage guided the Empire, and I merely offered perspective. Together, we proved that leadership is stronger when it values both experience and imagination. Strength lies not in the eyes, nor in power alone, but in understanding, empathy, and the courage to act wisely. Even though I have never seen the world as others do, I understand its patterns, its currents, and its possibilities, and I recognize that vision comes in many forms." Other systems began to adopt elements of the Empress's governance model, inspired by the practical success and ethical grounding of her initiatives. The influence of humans in Elithrian society became a symbol of possibility rather than controversy. Many began to understand that intelligence, morality, and creativity could bridge differences between species, forming alliances that strengthened civilizations rather than dividing them. Meanwhile, within the Elithrian Council, a subtle shift occurred. Minister Vale, once a vocal skeptic, approached Saralia privately. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I must admit that I underestimated the value of your perspective and of the human advisor you chose. Lumira has benefited in ways I did not foresee. It appears that true strength lies not only in tradition or technology, but in insight and adaptability. Leadership requires understanding, courage, and the ability to see potential where others see only limitations. The galaxy is vast, and success belongs to those willing to learn from all perspectives." It is a remarkable achievement. One afternoon, as Saralia and Jaren walked through a newly developed research district, they observed teams of Elithrians and humans working together. Engineers collaborated with scientists from distant worlds, students experimented with new ideas, and community leaders implemented programs that had been inspired by the Empress's guidance. "Look at this, Captain," Saralia said, her hands hovering above the activity, sensing the excitement and energy in the air. "This is the fruit of collaboration, understanding, and courage. We have shown that even the most unlikely partnerships can create a thriving, prosperous society." Humans are often underestimated, yet here we see how insight, creativity, and moral clarity can contribute to an empire's success. And it is your vision, Empress, that has made this possible. Citizens had embraced the opportunity to innovate and participate, and neighboring systems were beginning to recognize that intelligence, empathy, and cooperation could redefine strength in ways that neither brute force nor tradition could achieve. Even the Dravani collective, who had once watched with curiosity and doubt, sent messages of interest and respect. They requested advice on communication systems, resource management, and governance practices. It became clear that Lumira was no longer just a powerful empire. It was a beacon of insight and collaboration, demonstrating that leadership rooted in wisdom and morality could inspire others across the galaxy. One evening, Jaren and Cerelia stood on the highest terrace of the palace, feeling the rhythm of the city below. The wind carried subtle vibrations of life, trade, and community. The twin moons cast their glow across the silver plains, and though Cerelia could not see them, she felt their presence in the calm energy of the night. "Captain," she said, her voice full of quiet pride, "the future is no longer uncertain. We have shown that leadership is not about fear, domination, or appearances. It is about courage, insight, and the ability to understand others. Humans have contributed more than I could have imagined, and together we have created a model for what is possible. Together, we have shown that strength comes in many forms. Leadership is not measured by what one can see, but by the vision one holds, the courage to act, and the willingness to trust and collaborate. And in this, humanity has excelled beyond expectation." Council members collaborated more openly, and representatives from other systems began visiting to observe and adopt the principles that had guided Lumira's transformation. In the tranquility of the palace gardens, Cerelia and Jaren reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They had faced skepticism, subtle threats, and doubt. Yet through patience, intelligence, and courage, they had reshaped the empire, proving that even the most unlikely partnerships could create lasting change. "Captain," Cerelia said softly, "we have done more than guide Lumira. We have shown the galaxy that wisdom, empathy, and courage are greater strengths than fear or dominance. Humans, often underestimated, have contributed in ways that will be remembered for generations. Lumira will be remembered not only for its strength, but for its wisdom and heart." Humans had proven their worth not through power, but through insight, adaptability, and moral clarity. And the blind Empress had shown that true vision was not limited by sight. It was defined by wisdom, perception, and the courage to act rightly. In the quiet of the night, the city of Lumira pulsed with life, hope, and possibility. Across the galaxy, observers took note of the transformation, inspired by the partnership between a blind Empress and a human ambassador. The future was no longer a matter of fear or uncertainty. It was a canvas shaped by intelligence, courage, and collaboration. Cerelia, feeling the gentle vibrations of the palace around her, smiled quietly. The journey had been long, but the result was undeniable. The galaxy had witnessed a new model of leadership, one where empathy, creativity, and moral courage were recognized as the true measures of strength. And with Jaren by her side, she knew that Lumira, and perhaps the entire galaxy, was ready for a future defined by insight, wisdom, and hope. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, reflecting the possibilities that had been realized and the limitless potential of understanding, collaboration, and courage. In that light, the Empress and her human partner stood together, a testament to the enduring power of vision, intellect, and the belief that even the most unlikely alliances could change the course of history.